The 4-post, just by design, is going to have less maintenance. Number one, because of runways, you don't have any pivot points for arms that you need to lubricate. But what you do have is 4 columns that run on a collar with sliders in all 4 corners, and that's a friction point. What we like to do, we'll actually wax the post with a good old-fashioned paste wax. Wipe it on, rub it on, then wipe it off, and that helps lubricate them sliders, and that'll keep it from chattering. We don't get a lot of chattering, but if you do, the first thing to do is put some paste wax on your post. Again, how often? That's going to be up to you. Depends on how much you use it, because a lot of times this lift will go in a garage, car will go on top of it, and may set for 3 or 4 months before it ever gets used again. So you just kind of have to judge that for yourself. Lube points, this does have lube points. Because of these sheaves underneath here where the cables run, the cables on this lift are actually picking up the vehicle. Unlike equalizer cables on our 2-post, they're actually the lifting points. There's one in all 4 corners, so you'll notice 4 cables coming from your hydraulic cylinder. When this cylinder pulls in, it's pulling on those cables. That being said, you have, can you see the picture of these sheaves underneath here that the cables wrap around? Well, there's a pin that goes through the center of that spins on. All our backyard buddies have ports for grease fittings. Because the grease fitting sticks down, we don't leave them in it. So what you would have got with this lift is a spare grease fitting just to screw in there to grease your pin, take it out, screw it in the next one, grease your pin, take it out. You have 4 of these underneath here, 2 at this end, 2 at the lower end. If you notice, they're slacking this cable now because it's setting on the locks. That's when I like to grease them. It allows the grease to get where it goes. Now our pins are ported, so when you're greasing it, it's just not going everywhere. There's actually a hole sideways drilled into our port, and it's actually greasing the collar of the bearing or the sheave. So it doesn't take a lot of grease. You'll feel it as you're pumping it, you'll feel it easy, and all of a sudden it'll start to get tight, and that's when you know you're putting the grease where it needs to be. But definitely do them once a year. We also have sheaves which direct the cables to the top of the column. All 4 corners will have a sheave. It's behind this cover. It's the same sheave as we got down here, has a pin going through it, but you notice this has the grease fitting in it. The reason we leave the grease fittings in there, because it's not underneath here where you're going to hit your head on it and cut your head. So all these, you don't have to take the grease fitting in and out. Just put your gun on there, pump or 2 once a year, and you've greased that sheave. Very important with a 4-post lift to keep those pins and sheaves lubricated, because there's a lot of pressure. That's holding all the pressure of whatever vehicle you have on this. Now we have cables. I'm going to lower this lift a little bit. Like I said, these cables are actually supporting, this cable is supporting this corner. That cable is supporting that corner, just like in the front. Each cable is supporting the corner. But by nature, these are a spun cable, so they will have a tendency to stretch, which is very normal, especially initial stretch. Down the road, once most of the initial stretch is out, you may not need to adjust them as much. Again, it depends on how much you use your lift. But the simple way to adjust it is at the top. Each one of them studs that the cable is connected to has adjustment on it. And what I like to do to check the adjustment is I'll get it at a nice workable height, and I'll take a tape measure, and this is probably in another video, measure from the base to the bottom of the collar on all 4 sides. And whichever one's the highest, you just adjust the other ones until they're all the same. For example, say this is 3 feet and that's 2 feet 11 and a half. Well, I'd want to adjust that up so that it comes up to where I put my tape measure, they're both 3 feet. Then I'll do the same to the front. You're going to find that adjustment-wise, the front are going to take more adjustment, and that's just because the front, meaning the power unit, column, now that could be to the rear, depending how you put your lift, but this is your shortest cable. It will have the least amount of stretch. It just comes from the cylinder, right around the sheave, up. Next longest one comes from the cylinder, around this sheave, over and up. So it's pretty much the width of the runways longer. Your front ones, they come all the way down and spin all the way back up before they go over and up. That right front cable is going to be probably 3 times as long as this cable. So of course, when you get a little bit of stretch, you're going to get more stretch with it. So don't be surprised when you're adjusting them that the front ones need to be adjusted more than the rear. The last thing I'd like to mention is you'll see a spring here. This is a spring that actually engages your locks every time you hit a window. You want to check. There'll be one on the front and one in the back. All your locks on all your lifts are going to be engaged by springs. Springs break. So just take a visual look, see if that spring's still on there. They last a long time, but they do break. The best thing to do is just take a visual. Make sure your spring's wrong because that engages your locks. Always set your lifts on the locks, whether it's a 2-post or 4-post. When it's on the locks, like right now this isn't on the locks, if something catastrophic were to happen, like a cable just blow out, a hose to break, it's going to drop. There's going to be a catastrophic, it's going to catch itself, it's got secondary locks, it's going to do all the safety things, but say you're underneath there and it happens, you know, and your head's only a couple inches away from where you're working, well, it could hit you in the head. Always set your lifts on the locks.